Today I want to take a look at one of my favorite communion passages in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I really love this verse because in it, Paul helps complement and complete a picture for us of what it looks like to genuinely remember and celebrate Jesus and all that he's done for us. So here it is in verse 16. The cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? In the bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? I love this idea of participation. See, when we remember that Jesus is alive and that the church is the body of Christ in the world today, it makes sense that we would remember and celebrate all that Jesus has done by participating in that same work as it continues unfolding around us. So how do we get here? And what's the alternative to participating in God's ongoing work in and around us? Paul answers this by retelling an old story of God's people. See, back in the day, God's people were slaves in Egypt. And at just the right time, God sent a man named Moses to deliver the people from their oppression. Paul says that they were baptized as they passed through the Red Sea with water on each side of them and the cloud of God's presence hovering over them. And then they were sustained in the wilderness by supernatural bread and drink that God provided for the people. And yet, despite all this, despite their deliverance, despite their baptism, and despite their sustenance, Paul says that God was not pleased with these people because they had become idol worshipers. And what did that idol worship look like? Paul specifies that picture for us in something that should sound pretty familiar today. They were obsessed with eating and drinking, leisure, entertainment, and sexuality. Apparently, God's people mistakenly assumed that everything God had done and everything that God had provided for them was just meant for their own enjoyment, at which point they would simply go on their own way and pursue their own interests and desires. Unfortunately, many still have this mistaken assumption today. But on the contrary, what Jesus has done for us constitutes an invitation to become the men and women that God always intended for us to be, to live a new kind of life, as the Bible insists over and over again, an eternal kind of life that will be worth remembering even as we transition into Jesus and his eternal kingdom. It's a life of anticipation, looking ahead to what's yet to come, and finally, a life of participating in God's ongoing work both in us and through us in the lives of others.